Pediatrics has a special gift for Dr. Eckman. So Jim, if you can come up here. I think Peter Lane and Carlton Dampier are going to be presenting it. Clint? Last time I checked, you were also a member of the Department of Pediatrics. There are openings in adult hematology too. Big openings for these days.
Yeah. Actually, it would be really great if the other folks in pediatrics could join me up here. I know, and Lewis is here, so this is particularly great. One of the things that you've heard about today, but not in a lot of detail, is the enormous extent to which Jim's contributions in the area of public health have so markedly improved health outcomes for kids with sickle cell disease. And of course, the quintessential example of that is all of the things that he did to promote the implementation of newborn screening, not just in Georgia, but around the whole country. As a result of that, we pediatricians are acutely aware that the outlook for every single child we see, especially the new newborns that come to our clinic, that the outlook for those kids is infinitely better than it used to be because of what you've done. And we wanted to, when you first finally announced that you were going to retire, most of the folks up here on the stage, came to me and they said, well, what are we going to do for Jim? What are we going to do for Jim? We have to do something for Jim that would be meaningful from the pediatric community, because as an internist, you arguably have done more to improve the health outcomes of our patients than any of us. In thinking about this, I was also reminded about one of the things that you've taught all of us over the years, which is that actually we are not the experts in sickle cell disease. The experts in sickle cell disease are the patients and families who live with it. And so in thinking about how to thank you for what you've done for kids, I decided that I should consult an expert. And the expert I consulted is Brandon's mother. Brandon is now an 8-year-old with sickle cell anemia who is one of the 1,700 kids that we take care of at Children's. I've known Brandon's mother for actually for 20 years because I cared for 3 of her children who were unfortunate enough to have sickle cell disease. And Brandon was the last. He's now 8 years old. He's doing very well. He's on hydroxyurea. He's getting straight A's in school. And really his asthma and allergies are much more problematic than his sickle cell disease. So I asked her if she had any suggestions for us about how could we personalize and make real the fact that what you've done in public health and newborn screening has a real impact on every single patient from the moment of birth. And we talked about it, and she came up with an idea. Well, first of all, when I said it was for you, she said, oh, Dr. Eckman. Now, I've known this woman for 20 years. She said, oh, we knew about Dr. Eckman before we even met you. And then she reminded me that she had had a 4th child with sickle cell. Her oldest son was born in South Carolina in the 80s and died of pneumococcal sepsis. And so she appreciates the difference between the 80s, when her firstborn died of pneumococcal sepsis, and her current experience with an 8-year-old who's on hydroxyurea and is doing exceptionally well. And so she said, well, I think I have something that might be helpful. She said, when Brandon was born, kids, we do, in pediatrics, we do those little feet prints, right, the imprints of the feet. And she said, well, when Brandon was born, they did that on the paper and everything, but they also did it on a scrub shirt, and that I could keep. And she said, I would like you to give that to Dr. Eckman. So this is the scrub shirt that was given to Brandon's mom and his family when he was born. You can't see in the back, but you can see clearly those are his feet. Underneath it says something else that you taught us: transition begins at birth. I think I have a copy here. I'll read the brief dedication that's on the back. This is presented to James Eckman on behalf of Brandon and thousands of other infants and families in Georgia and throughout the nation who have benefited from your leadership in the development and implementation of universal newborn screening for sickle cell disease. We hope that this keepsake from the birth of one child will always remind you that your efforts to improve health outcomes for those with sickle cell disease have made an immeasurable difference in the lives of countless other children and families, most of whom you will never know. Thank you for many years of inspirational advocacy, leadership, mentorship, collaboration, and friendship, and for teaching us that transition begins at birth. And this is from your pediatric friends and colleagues, and most importantly, from Brandon's family.
And can we also declare Jim Eckman an honorary pediatrician?
Dr. Hessel is
all right, well, I have to find a hard act to follow. So I came from Washington, D.C., where I was at a HRSA meeting. Jim at one point said, "You need to get into HRSA." I'm like, "Really? No, I don't know why." But I did a little shopping. You'll recognize this from National Airport, where I was reminiscing as I was waiting for the Delta flight about times I'd spent with Dr. Eckman at National Airport. And I recalled several conversations where he schooled me on our federal government and how the agencies and how he thought about them, the NIH, CDC, HRSA. And when I saw this T-shirt, I thought, well, he needs something to wear in that river when he's fly fishing that summarizes his impression of the federal government. And it reads, "I love my country, it's the government I'm afraid of." Hanging right next to it was another appropriate T-shirt, because it occurred to me that that very government he fears will be highly seeking his services. After all, he's retired. He has time. So I'm sorry, Margot, but if you come to look at the cherry blossoms, they'll know where he's at in the tidal basin. The NSA can track him. The CDC is, my gosh, across the street. And so even as you run from that 301 phone call to ferret code or the 202, there is a federal program I would encourage you to embrace, which is the Federal Witness Protection. They are extra large because everything from Washington shrinks. And then finally, on behalf of myself and the Sickle Cell Adult Provider Network, I have a card which you can read later as a container for a gift to which Chris and I conspired. I will point out, go ahead and open it, please, that neither last night nor at lunch today was there ice cream for desserts. And for those in the know, there's a long-standing tradition of ice cream in the adult sickle cell community. I'm mightily concerned that they will not be attentive to your needs in retirement. So there are nearly $100 worth of gift cards.
we have a plaque here for you from all of us at Grady and also Emory, and it reads, "In appreciation for your untiring efforts, for your relentless pursuit of healing, for providing longevity and quality of life to the patients of the Georgia Comprehensive Sickle Cell Program, and for the development of the Acute Care Centre and Georgia Comprehensive Sickle Cell Centre at Grady, presented on the 16th day of November 2013.
Setting up. Is anybody in this room from BMW card?
Chris.
Okay.
Briefly, for everybody's flights, please talk to Mary and Chris so we can make sure the airport shuttle shows up just in time for you to have a transaction cards.
Well, while he's getting his presentation together, this will be very, very brief, but I had to say something for Dr. Eckman. My name is Jackie George, and I represent the Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia. We're the community-based organization in the metro Atlanta area. And we've had a relationship with Dr. Eckman since 1979, 1980. And on behalf of the sickle cell community, we would just like to say thank you so much for all you've done, for all those years you've been there for us. We've had some little fights, but this is all in the family. So we really will miss him. We do have his cell phone number 2, so we will be calling him, but thank you so much, Dr. Eckman. You will be missed.
All right, so in usual form, I usually, how do I do it this way? How do I do it this way?
You have 7 minutes.
I talk fast, so I'm New York. When this symposium was being set up, I asked Chris, I said, Chris, what about his junior mentors? Are they going to get a chance to say anything about Jim? And she was like, yeah, they'll give you a few minutes here and there. I'll do a few slideshows. And I couldn't resist the opportunity to say a few things in 7 minutes about who is Jim Eckman. Okay, I think everyone can see the thing on the board. And I put on here some pictures of all the different groups he belongs to and he's part of, and that he's interfaced with many of his junior mentors. It doesn't cover everywhere, but this is just some of them. And just to really put a human face to all the science that has been discussed today, these are the words that I've heard from everybody in the room. I've heard over the past 9 years of me knowing Jim that have described him as an individual. He's a dreamer, a visionary, a leader. He's wise, he's humble, he's steadfast and disciplined. He's a good friend, he's a husband and a father. But over and above, he's human. And we pulled up a lot of different quotes that describe these characteristics of Jim Eckman. I think this is going to be more helpful for him when he goes home and with his family to kind of see what people have been saying about him behind closed doors and what quotes come to mind when they think about Jim Eckman. Dreamers are marked as impractical. The truth is they are most practical as their innovations lead to progress and a better way of life for all of us. He's a visionary. Throughout history, people with new ideas who think differently and try to change things have been always called troublemakers. He's a leader and a mentor. A role model in the flesh provides more than inspiration. His or her very existence is confirmation of possibilities. One may have every reason to doubt, saying, yes, someone like me can do this. And this is true for my life, for Julie's life, for all the people he's touched academically, professionally, and personally. He's a philanthropist, a giver. Alan talks about his giving in the early days of the Sickle Cell Program, how he invested in himself, his life, and his time to build the program. If you wait until you can do everything for everybody instead of something for somebody, you'll end up not doing nothing for nobody. Share your knowledge is a way to achieve immortality, and I think what he's done for sickle cell disease has put him in this category. He's a revolutionary. Throughout history, people would know, I think we did this already. Let's go down. Moving in the wrong direction. Okay. A gentleman would be ashamed should his deeds not match his words. A final test of a true gentleman is his respect for those who can be of no possible service to him. And I've watched him where people who have no academic benefit to his life benefit from his listening, his time, and his efforts. He's a husband and a dad. The older I get, the less time I want to spend with the part of the human race that didn't marry me, and this is for his wife, Kathy. And being a father is like being Santa Claus. You believe in Santa Claus first, then you don't believe in him, and then you become Santa Claus for your children. But most importantly, Jim Eckman is a friend, and he's also human. A true friend says, I'll be there when you say you need me, but the words that are unheard from his heart are, I'll be there whether you say you need me or not. And if all my friends want to jump off a bridge, I wouldn't jump with them. I'll be at the bottom of the bridge to catch them. And I love this that says, if you're kind, people may accuse you of being selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you're successful, you will win from false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and frank, they'll accuse you of trying to cheat people, or they'll want to cheat you. Be honest anyway. What you spend years building, somebody will try to destroy overnight, but build it anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous of you, but be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. And I think we can all agree that Jim has given his best to sickle cell, to the community of hematology, and to many, many, many families who have been affected by sickle cell disease. And we appreciate that so very much. And my last slide, congratulations, Jim, on your life, your career, and your amazing legacy. To me, personally, to sickle cell disease.
Whoops. Oh, mine got buried. Okay. I have to have my slides. A professor can do nothing without their slides. We'll get this. So I have an absolute limit of 10 minutes, and I don't want to spend it at the computer getting this ready. So I'm going to talk while I do this. And I'm sorry that I'm distracted, but the first person I have to really sincerely thank is Fadlo. And he didn't tell me that we should have a sickle cell symposium in honor of my retirement, but that I had to have one. And he knows that I'm a person who would like to sort of slip out the back door without any fanfare, and he was absolutely right. This day has been the pinnacle of my career. Having you all here and presenting for me was really marvelous. I chose the audience based on people that I had collaborated with who really were giants in the field of sickle cell disease, because I knew they would put on a good show for this symposium, and they certainly have. I can't honor everybody that I would have liked to include it, and frankly, everybody in the audience here is important, and I really am sincerely touched by the fact that you're in the audience, and I want to thank you for coming today and helping us celebrate this. Mary Suduth and Chris Terry Carter deserve a special thanks for all of the hard work they put into organizing. They've done a spectacular job. And I really have to end with some personal thoughts about some really marvelous people that I have worked with over the years, some of whom are here, but many of whom are not here. John Eaton was my mentor too, along with Bob Hebel, and John was in Hungary with no electronic communication when we were organizing this symposium, so he never responded and didn't get back to me until shortly before we had this, and he apologized. He said he really didn't want to come because I was too young to retire, and really he hadn't thought about sickle cell disease for years. He'd gone over to the dark side and was studying oncology. John was incredibly important to me. He was a PhD and a physical anthropologist, and I went into his lab not to study sickle cell, but to study malaria. And I had this fascination with malaria, and when I became a hematologist, I really was fascinated with the question of why there were so many genetic disorders of the red cell in areas where malaria was common. And Margot will be happy to hear that I focused on G6PD deficiency. And that brought me into John's lab because that was one of the projects he had for fellows to work on. The story really is important because I was a very cerebral hematology fellow. Whenever we had an idea, I ran to the library and read everything I could about it. And John set me straight. He said, just do it and see what happens. And I learned the scientific method, and I think that really has served me well. But more importantly, Clint talked about the calcium effect on dehydrating red cells. Well, John was focused on the calcium effect on the red cell membrane and how it factored into the formation of irreversibly sickled cells that everybody thought were really important for blood viscosity back then. And John needed blood. And there were 5 sickle cell patients in Minneapolis, and I took care of all of them so that John could get blood samples, and that's really how I developed my interest in sickle cell disease. After I finished my fellowship, I started at the University of Minnesota on the faculty, but I really wasn't satisfied in an academic practice. And then I got an opportunity to go to Grady, and I always loved county hospitals. It was the high point of my training. And Grady is a phenomenal resource. I really had the opportunity to serve individuals who really needed my health care. And I could make a difference in people's lives, and that was really important. But Grady was more than that. It was just the perfect classroom for training health professionals at all levels. And I had a passion for teaching, so it was a perfect place. And then Danny Armstrong said something that is really true. The sickle cell and indigent patients will do research with you, but you have to really show one thing, that you care about them and their disease before they'll be willing to participate. And they're too used to people just having them stick out their arms and give a blood sample or give data so that they can further their research. But if you show an interest in them, they're passionate about wanting to participate. And so I could do everything that I wanted to do as an academic physician. I came to Grady with a 5-year plan to leave after 5 years, and I've been there now for over 35 years. Couldn't get away. There was collegiality. We were a much smaller division then. 5 of these individuals were fellows, 4 of whom are in practice in Atlanta today. One is still in practice up in Philadelphia very successfully, and we could talk about who they are later. But more importantly, I really was rapidly introduced to some really remarkable individuals. And Skip Elsis, head of human genetics, took me under his wing and actually needed me. He wanted a genetics grant, a public health genetics grant from HRSA, and he wrote it without any sickle cell in it, and they sent it back to him and said, without sickle cell, you're not going to get funding for a genetics program in the South. And so he immediately called me and called Mary Harris, who was a PhD in genetics, who was then the executive director of the Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia. And we spent one of the first weekends that I was in Atlanta writing a grant for the genetic services and a sickle cell component. And that brought me funding and also a collaboration that really has lasted for years. it was stated how important newborn screening was. Well, Georgia actually was the third state, or second or third state, depending on who you believe, to initiate newborn screening. But we targeted to people who were deemed to be a higher risk. And Mary Harris and I actually collected data based on the first years of that screening that was presented at the Consensus Development Conference that the NIH held after the PROP study was completed, and we presented data that showed that targeted screening was not effective and it wasn't efficient. It didn't save money because you ended up screening as many or more people and you were missing cases, about 20% of the kids. And that paper was courageous because we were showing a very negative outcome in Georgia, but it also was very important because one of the conclusions of that consensus conference was that there should be universal screening offered to all individuals. And unfortunately, it took until 1999, I think, to actually get Georgia to agree to that after we showed clearly in the early 80s that it was not effective. Now, Mary and I also did more. We partnered with Tom Kenny at Duke. We wrote a grant to help implement newborn screening throughout the Southeast, and we got all of the states up in the Southeast up and running with newborn screening, and 6 other states around the country. And this really was remarkable. When I was starting in Georgia, the data looked like this, and this is from Jamaica, but our data was identical. And 20 to 25% of the kids were dying before age 5 from infectious complications. And we felt that if we detected them at birth and got them in health care, that we could obviate that. And the data clearly shows that. This is Quinn's data and data from London now, which shows that virtually all infants are not living to be 5, but to be 18 now because of newborn screening, because of early intervention, and because of the excellent care provided by our pediatric colleagues. And so this was a major accomplishment, and actually what I'm thinking about trying to work on now is, now we got all these adults we have to take care of, and we really don't have health care delivery systems for them. Now, the other thing this grant did is allowed me to hire this individual who is really important in my life. And I came to Georgia motivated, full of ideas, but I was totally culturally incompetent. I had interacted with a few sickle cell patients in Minneapolis, but they were entirely different than the individuals I came across in Georgia. And Phyllis Benjamin was a nurse who I hired with the first money I had, and she taught me how to listen to patients, how to listen to their families, how to be sensitive to them, and to be culturally competent. She had the courage to tell me when I was wrong, how I was offending people, why I was offending them, and why I shouldn't do that again. And over the years, I learned that I probably really started to get pretty good at this late in my career, but Phyllis really was just a remarkable influence on my life. She also brought her daughter to our program, who was the best social worker I've ever had. We've already heard about Berutha. All I can say was she was advocacy, not just for the funding of the center, but every time things were really going bad, somehow Berutha would show up on the wards and say, "Jim, how are things going?" And say, "You know, keep doing it. You're doing the right thing." And really was an advocate for me and for sickle cell and for the proper care of individuals with all diseases. Collaboration. The center was developed. Joanne Beasley was working with me and Phyllis at the time we had the idea for the center. Phil Lamson deserves major credit for orchestrating the implementation of the center and helping run it for the first years. Phil was immensely helpful, and as Alan pointed out, he recruited Alan to the program, which also was another key person. We developed a staff, about 35 people, that had very little turnover. We actually have some people in that picture that are still working today after 30 years in the Sickle Cell Center. a collaboration of really all remarkable individuals who all should share in what we've talked about today. There's another partner that I have to talk about, and that's Chris Terry Carter, shown here very early when she wouldn't let me take a picture of her face, and then here I finally snuck one a number of years later. Chris was a partner. We've been together 28 years, and she has told me what to do, and I say, yes, Chris, when would you like me to do it? And she's been a remarkable help over all of these years, and in fact, the secret of my success. And really, if you want a person to show you how to do customer relations, I get comments from all over the country and all over the world of how kind and what a wonderful person Chris is. And she's always saying, no, you know, Dr. Eckman can't do that for you. And they still feel good about it. Family support. You know, we had a tight family and we did everything together until I opened the center. And then I wasn't there a lot. And even when I was with the family, I was preoccupied. But they stuck with me. And I guess you can't see it very well. This is Hans, Natalie. Hans is my oldest. This is Philip, his wife Erin, and then my granddaughter Eve at age 18, who's not only suffered more adversity than most of us will in our lifetime, but she's excelled in doing what she's interested with in life and is now in college and pursuing a life, and I'm very proud of her. I'm proud of my whole family, and I have to thank them for sticking with me through all of this and supporting me. And then I have to add this. This is the person who's been everything to me. For 50 years, Margot has stood by me. I've been not there. I've been preoccupied. I get phone calls at all sorts of inappropriate times. And she's always been there. And not only has she been there for me, but she's always kept the smile on my face through all of this. And actually, now that we're spending more time together, everybody's commenting that I'm smiling all of the time. So thank you. This has been a marvelous day. I really appreciate it.